Hello, welcome to this live stream. We're going live 2 minutes early because I didn't want to keep staring at the screen waiting. My name is Margaret Pennard. Welcome to my channel. You're on Booktube. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author, and today is a Wednesday, and every other Wednesday I do a Wednesday wrap-up of book reviews. So today, as you could see from the thumbnail, I've got five books to review for you, and they're all very good. So I'm looking forward to this. I've also got some results and a question and some announcements. So stay tuned for all that if you can sit tight for it. We've got an Eva in the house. Hello, hello, and a Jim. Hello. So let's see. Wednesday wrap up every 2 weeks, Sunday streams at 10 Pacific time, and first and final Fridays. That is the channel spiel. So, the announcement, just to remind people if they haven't heard yet, is that I've got a very anticipated discussion coming up on Friday. It took us a solid month to read No Logo. So, Anya of Well Traveled Books and I will be discussing this on Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. It's by Naomi Klein, who is a fantastic author, great writer, has written many bangers of nonfiction over the years as an investigative journalist. And I'm very excited for this discussion. We had a lot of things to say, so I hope you'll join us for that. Second thing I wanted to say, we've got Cat Pa here. Hello, here, but cooking. All right. I'll try to speak over the sizzling of the stove. And Anita AF Stewardess, hi, is here too. Welcome. I did want to say before we got started that I had a special mysterious admirer send me a beautiful, Scottish billionaire book, which I was just looking at, which is funny because she didn't know. And also caramels. So I think we had a discussion earlier about the scent that you may get from males and whether it is a favorite or off-putting, and she specifically sent caramels. So if you were there for that discussion of the scent of a man and all that, then you know. If you know, you know. So thank you, mysterious admirer Leslie. I'm very excited about that, and the detail of the scent that was in my book means that she read it, and that's just exciting. Little inside joke, little Easter egg for the fans of ORLA Rafferty Seeks Her Fortune. All right, so announcement. Thank you. We're on to the first book. So every 2 weeks, 5 books. It's a little under my average, but here's the really cool thing. I finished this book, Seaweed Chronicles, A World at the Water's Edge by Susan Hand Shutterly, which I love the photo on the cover. It's really cool. And this means that my Climathon readathon for 2024 is complete. I don't think I've ever done that. All 12 prompts complete. 12. They weren't per month. They were anytime through the year, but they were thematic. And so you had to find ones that join the theme. And I had plenty of books that I had read previously that fit the themes that Tasman and Anya came up with. But this year I had to search. I had to scrounge a little for several of them. So Oceans was the last one. And I finally got to this book, which I'd had for a little bit, and got through it. So how did I like Seaweed Chronicles? What is it about? I took notes for this wrap up. So let's see. It's about the local ecosystem in the Gulf of Maine. It's an assessment of the local ecosystem and gives you sort of personal stakes in the safeguarding of this ecosystem. So it was interesting enough, like not something I would normally seek out if I wasn't looking for like the one last prompt. But I do work for a company that is centered in Maine. So that was kind of fun for that connection. That's Audiophile Magazine, if anyone is curious. And I do eat seaweed. I do like seaweed. And I do like people that are trying to safeguard the last protections that we have. So one of the things that I don't know if I knew before I read this book was the phrase fishing down the food chain, which is a phrase that has come to describe what we've been doing to ourselves in a bad way, which is we used to fish for the big fish, and they are no longer plentiful because of overfishing, environmental damage, etc. And so then we went to the next fish down, the ones that they used to eat. And then we went to the next fish down, the ones that they used to eat, until we got to shellfish and all this stuff. So that's how we got to actually harvesting seaweed in an industrial way. And so I was like, oh, interesting. Um, what do I have on this book that I noted was interesting? We have a lot of interesting nature mini systems. There was something called boreal soup that they said is something unique in the Gulf of Maine, which is a current that basically creates a up and down mixing. So you've got all this rich nutrients on the bottom that is actually pushed up, and creatures will feed on that in the higher, warmer waters. And so I thought boreal soup, that's an interesting phrase. I like that a lot. Um, we had a description of how eels procreate. So a while ago, I read something in a book that said there was this myth that no one knew how eels had sex, if you will, or laid their eggs because they'd never found a place where they did. And so there's actually a page here that describes American eels, European eels. They all go to the Sargasso Sea in the Caribbean, I believe, and there's a seaweed forest, and they disappear there and they change form. But that's actually a cycle in eel procreation. And so I found it fascinating that someone had actually pinned down what happens to them, even though they'd still never seen the baby eels. They'd seen something else come up. So somewhere deep in the water under the seaweed forest, this is happening, presumably. So I thought that was cool to find out. Hi, Laura. Welcome. Laura Nettles is here. And Maggie Ward. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the show. I'm on the first book still, Seaweed Chronicles, that I'm reviewing here. And the next part that I liked was that they had a couple recipes. So Susan, the author, sort of went and interviewed a bunch of different people. Very little about historical seaweed harvest, but I did like those little pieces that she put in, and mostly about current review processes, historical industrial harvests, etc. But one of the historical pieces was about cooking and how people in the Northeast would subsist on laver bread or laver cakes, I think. And I was like, I'd never known what that was. I did know, of course, that the tradition in Scotland was to use the seaweed for industrial processing to get your rent money. If you've read The Keening, you know. Again, if you know, you know. And also for lazy beds, when they were farming and they didn't have good topsoil, they would use seaweed to make little channels to enrich or make soil for their crops, their subsistence crops. Laver cake and laver bread are these really intense, hours-long cooked down seaweed recipes, and they don't sound very appetizing to me, but I'd be curious to try it if I was ever in the area. So I do like that she put that in. That was cool. And as someone who loves historical recipes and poking around, like that was definitely my brand. Um, Hello, PDX Piney. Good morning. And Evia says, I have read The Keening. You finished it. This is the first confirmation that you finished. I'm very excited to hear that. Eva's asking if I could try to make it. Ooh, it's a specific kind of seaweed, and there are a lot of names for seaweeds, both Atlantic and Pacific. And so I would have to conduct quite a search to figure out that I had the right one. And then I could probably like cook it down and make it. But again, it doesn't sound that appetizing. Very nutritious, full of minerals. I'm not sure if I want to try that. Ooh, pretty sure book 2 is this unopened package next to me. Oh, that's fun. We're in the book opening, the book mail opening part of the journey. I love that. That's fun, Eva. All right, so with those 3, what else? There was a quote about when humans perfect our capacity to harvest wild products. we get closer to destroying what we seek. And I thought, huh, hubris. See that cycle? See that like crashes as soon as we get too good at doing something because we haven't figured out how to do it sustainably. Ding, ding, ding. There's an interesting point in the sort of current regulation landscape where she pointed out that there isn't appropriate discrimination in harvesting regulations. So you have folks who come along to drag the bay floor, the Gulf floor for shellfish or oysters or clams. I think it's clams. And then you have people who actually like dive to cut seaweed. And it's like they're gathering data and input from stakeholders to figure out the regulations for the seaweed harvesters. And that's the diving and cutting, right? Like hand by hand. And then there's no regulation. And I don't even know if there's a moratorium on the people who are dragging the bottom, or there is. So their regulation is that they get a certain day and the divers get a certain day, but the draggers go first. So like if you're visiting a bed the day after someone has dragged it, like what sense does that make? And she pointed out that dragging the bed, the bottom of the floor, ocean floor, bay floor, Gulf floor, whatever you want to call it, has been around so long that there is no appetite or outcry for new regulations because it's sort of accepted that that's the way it's done. And I'm like, yes, please call that out. Please say that this needs to be brought into the same world of new regulations that diving and cutting does. That makes sense to me. At one point, she's with someone who goes out to one of the coast islands and harvests there and comes back. And she had a pretty turn of phrase that talked about the overlapping visions of a home place. And if you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I love thinking about how people perceive home, what sort of emotions are involved in that, what sort of historical complications are involved in that, and how it evolves and different populations, versions, overlapping visions of a home place can put us into conflict. But like it's good for a book, but it's not good in real life. So I think that's a really important point where we could discuss things with people and how to make it better, both for the people and for the planet. Let's see. Yeah. There's also debate in the regulation landscape about who owns the seaweed because it's in the intertidal zone. I'm not sure if that's the actual term, but like they decided sort of where property ends and where ocean begins and where public enforcement starts, but there's a sort of gray area that they haven't figured out yet. And some people think if the landowners own that intertidal zone, there would be better protections because they'd have money to fight people coming in to harvest it. And some people think if it was owned publicly, you could have a bunch of NGOs that would be able to enforce protections. So that is an interesting discussion. I don't know the answer on that. It wasn't determined in the book yet. The book is from 2018, so you may have advanced a little bit since then, but it's interesting. I don't know if anyone coming to comment has an opinion on that very specific niche issue, but there we are. The only thing that sort of weirded me out is a nice like discussion of local ecosystem and where we were 7 years ago. Was that she describes people in a weird kind of way. At one point, she says she has a lithe, almost Austen shape, Austen with an E-N, meaning Jane Austen. And I was like, I don't know how I would feel about someone describing me that way in a book when they were talking about me as a scientist. So besides that, I really like the way that she brings the personal details and the stakeholders into the discussion. So 4 out of 5, Seaweed Chronicles. Glad to read it. Got to know a bunch more about seaweed and the Gulf of Maine, and Climathon done. Check. So very excited about that. All right, let me catch up with the chat. Yeah, Eva says, I had never heard of such farming until the Keening. Yay! So like entertainment and education in one lovely package. A lot of other places do it too, a little differently depending on, how their culture learned and what point in time they entered the industry and what the economy was like, what the incentives were. But yeah, definitely like a homegrown thing in other places too. Maggie says seaweed harvesting by hand is as dangerous as pearl harvesting. Ooh, well, that probably depends on the location because the coastal islands that I was reading about seemed pretty calm and like the people definitely knew the location and when and where to go. So, you mitigate your risk that way. Ketpa says, often my secret weapon in cooking is adding a bit of nori. Well, good for umami. Excellent. Nori. So that interests me because the way they were talking about the phycocolloids, phylocolloids. See, I'm not a scientist. Someone will correct me in the chat, maybe. But that was definitely the second part. They said there were like 3 different types. And I would have thought kombu is what people add because that's in a bunch of my Japanese cookbooks, both for like a gel or a type of seasoning. Have you ever tried that one, Catpaw? I'd be curious to know. Maggie says, dragging to harvest damages the seafloor and destroys habitat. Exactly. I think most of us know that by now. So we're just, we haven't caught up with like the industry rules. Leslie is here. Leslie, did you catch the thank you shout out to the mysterious admirer? Eva says, yay, Team Earth. Awesome. I'm on that team as well. Who owns the seaweed? What a dumb question. I hate capitalism. Good point. Right? But I mean, if you're going to sell it, you have to sort of go back up the chain to who do you buy it from? Yeah. But yeah, good question. So pointing out the ridiculousness of it. Eva says, it's like seeing bags of sticks for sale at the craft store. Literal sticks for sale. Sticks for money. Sticks. Exactly. Yeah, actually, what did I see? In this book about seaweed, they said something about they use it and then when it's empty, they sell it to Michael's and it becomes these like empty, and I can't remember what it is, but I remember or Joann's or like a fabric craft store kind of thing. Yeah. For money. Yeah, I know. I know. Only you could make learning more about seaweed sound fun. I'm happy to pass that little like excitement along. Yes. Oh, yeah. Not literally a dumb question. It's a valid question, but that it must be a question at all. Yes, clarifying. Makes sense. PDX Piney says, Climathon complete. Still looking forward to more climate content here, though. Yes, and you will hear the big one coming up at the end of this this book review challenge, not challenge, wrap up today is the big one. So lots to say about it. Oh no, not yet. Okay, you might want to rewind and just speed up, listen at 2 times speed, which is I do. I'll watch the replay since I hopped on late. or that. Either one. Okay, so that was a seaweed book. That was just the first book. It was good. Climathon complete. And then I had in my notes, I was going to share the poll results. A very small sample, but people who voted on the last live stream for the 10 before the end. Guess which one I'm going to be prioritizing from that list. Yes, historical magical lesbians. So I will definitely put this on my list for reading before the end of the year, even though I knew the end by C.L. Polk. So if you want to check out my last live stream with the books that I profiled and know why this one won out, you'll see. So I'm excited. That's on my list now, along with probably 5 of the rest of those before the end of the year. So exciting. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the mysteries that I finished. So I've got 2 of those. I've got To Track a Traitor by Iona Wishaw. It's part of the Lane Winslow mystery series. I think I've skipped a couple, but this is the second most recent, I believe, and I did buy it new, and it is pretty big. So I was just treating myself on Small Business Saturday at a local bookshop, and I have no regrets. And then the other one is Shudder by Ramona Emerson. And this is a Indigenous author who set her mystery in Pueblo, Arizona, I believe. Arizona. Nope, New Mexico. I guessed wrong. Albuquerque Police Force. So I'm gonna do this one first, but I was gonna say how I came to this. I started this book and I only got like 12 or 13 pages in last year. She has had a new book come out since then because she's like busting them out. And her new book put her on Sarah DeVello's mystery show, Mystery and Thriller Mavens, which he does with Murder by the Book bookstore in Texas. And it sounded so good. I listened to the show on YouTube and she's great. And I thought, oh, well, I should really go back and read her first book. The beginning is super, super graphic. And I think that's why I was like, I don't know if I can read this right now. But I went back and I picked it up and I got through that part. And the rest of it wasn't as bad. So I will talk about that in a second. But I just wanted to give you the sourcing details. So first up, Iona Wishaw, who is a Canadian Pacific Northwest author. So I'm a fan. Let's see. She's great. I love her historical mysteries. They're about an ex-spy who is living in the BC province and basically trying to live a life. And she keeps stumbling over these mysteries. And she was sort of tangling with the local police department because of this, and then eventually got into a much better relationship with the police department. In fact, marrying the chief inspector or whatever his title is, Inspector Darling. And so now they're together, and in this installment of the series, she's actually called back because she has some sick family in the UK, which is where she's from. And Inspector Darling's case also takes him to the UK. That's not a spoiler. So there's actually 3 threads to the story. There's her sister and what she's got mixed up in, and she doesn't have a good relationship with her sister. So that is a very interesting new aspect we get to see to our lovely heroine. And then there's also an old case that takes the inspector to the UK, and a new case, which is a disappearance and then turns into a murder in their local Canada area. So all 3 of these are sort of mixed in together in a very deft way. I will say it's a very clean series. It's sort of like how you would imagine people talking about a married couple's relationship in like 1950. Like the camera sort of darkens and the bedroom door closes and there's a wink and there's like a comment next morning. And so it's different from some of my other fare. So if any of you are curious about historical mysteries that are very clean and sort of folksy, but also have lots of great plot details, I would definitely recommend the Lane Winslow mystery series for a little something different. So yeah, it's the only series I know that's like that. What other details did I have to share about it? Dry humor, very clean, and okay. So there's a reference in this book that is a quote. Someone quotes saying the female of the species is more deadly than the male, and I was like, why did we just have an electronic house music from the 90s reference? So I looked it up, and it's actually a reference from Rudyard Kipling poetry. And I was like, oh, I feel very dumb now. So in case anyone didn't know that, the song is from 1996. It's by a British band called Space, which I didn't know because I was just listening to the radio as a teenager. And I definitely grew up with that song, the female of the species. And I thought it was more deadlier, but it's just a British accent saying more deadly than the male. Apparently, this is from a Rudyard Kipling poem and has been recycled several times in other media references. So I just thought that was funny and thought I would relay that in case anyone else didn't know the reference either. Oh, I didn't even include the best part. Hi, Gareth. Welcome to the stream. Book Songs and Other Magic asks, what part of the UK is To Track a Traitor set in? Hello. To Track a Traitor is, she gets to London and they immediately head up to Edinburgh, outside Edinburgh, where their grandparents live. And then they go back to London and then to some random place at the end of a railroad, and they kind of hop around trying to evade somebody. And I didn't recognize it. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere. It's in the south. You will be better able to tell me if I have some time to go back and find that place. I will text you it. But yeah, it's set in Scotland part of the time, just for a little bit. And then mostly around London, where Scotland Yard is investigating this murder, and then the characters in the book are trying to evade a traitor, if you will. So, yeah. Sorry I didn't put that in my show notes. Eva says, "I didn't know that." Did you know the song and not the poem like me? Because then I'll feel better. Oh, the 90s reference. Yeah, crying. Yeah. I mean, it's a book that came out, like, last year, so I was like, "Why would she put that in as an Easter egg?" And then it made much more sense. Yeah. Gareth says, "And it's an old phrase that lots of people use, like, 'Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.'" A lot of those phrases actually have, like, a second part that changes the meaning, which I always think is hilarious. So, I've been looking them up when I hear someone mention them to go, "Does that have a second part that just completely turns it on its head?" Because it's entertaining. But yeah, Gareth, it's actually a Rudyard Kipling poem where he uses that phrase. So after that, it's been picked up. All right, so now for the other mystery, which is Shudder by Ramona Emerson. Step back there, old school. So as I said, Indigenous author, and it's about actually, this is the first in a series. The second book that she just published is the second in the series. I'm very curious about that now. It's about our main character who is a photographer for the Albuquerque police, but she's not a police officer. She is a subcontractor. So she works for someone who has a contract to photograph stuff, which means she has a really shitty schedule. She's on call a lot of the time, and she has to go out in the middle of the night and like photograph stuff that is pretty grisly. So that's what initially turned me off in the first like 10 to 12 pages. And I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. Twist is she is an Indigenous person, and she grew up knowing that she could see ghosts. Like as a baby, her first memory is seeing, I think, her grandfather. So as she was growing up, her mother couldn't handle her upkeep, and so she grew up with her grandmother on a reservation in a sort of hardscrabble existence, has a lot of experience with ghosts, has a lot of trouble with the school system growing up because of that, and not a lot of friends. So when we meet her as an adult, she's a little antisocial, but she has two great friends in the city and a good job. However, when we meet the new crime scene victim, she turns into a ghost right away and is really on her case about investigating. So the main character, Rita, is faced with uh, a ghost who is trying to get her to investigate her death. And when she does, she gets into trouble with the police because there's some like corruption going on that she's seeing is connected. So she tries to get into that, which is very dangerous. And then she's also got her relationship with her grandmother and the people from the reservation, and how she's drawing on that and trying to balance seeing ghosts, getting justice, and staying alive. So it's very exciting. It's very much a page turner, well written, interesting, unique voice. Um, and I learned a lot both about crime scene stuff and Pueblo, this imaginary community she's dreamed up. So from my notes, we've got memorable characters. I think my favorite secondary character was Mr. Bitsilly, who is a medicine man friend of her grandmother's, and he's really tried to look out for her over the years. So he's both in the childhood scenes and growing up scenes as well as the current scenes, and I liked seeing both of those interactions and how the relationship has evolved. The structure is a bit different. So it alternates between her growing up to explain her backstory and the current sort of like very actiony and scary Albuquerque setting with the police and the crimes. And I kind of felt that disruptive. I found that disruptive. I wanted to stay in one when I was in it. So I was a little reluctant to keep jumping back and forth, but eventually they made up, and then we're sort of in one for the last maybe quarter of the book. So just to let you know, that was one of the things that maybe you like, that when it jumps back and forth. It's not dual timeline because we don't follow two. It's just that we're jumping back and forth for backstory reasons and then sort of wind it up together. So that could work very well for someone else. Like I said, unique voice, the tone I thought was very different for mysteries that I've read, so that was great. And educative but reflective, with the caveat that it is graphic right at the beginning. And there's a bit in the middle that's pretty gruesome too, when you're talking about, like, how people died and how you see them as ghosts. Like, if that's not your thing and that's gonna make you feel some kind of way, I would recommend maybe a different a different, author, but good if you like graphic, action and don't mind the corpses and stuff. Um, yeah, and I should have done this before, but I can put a link to the interview on, Sarah's channel because I think that'll be good. So Gareth says, great song though, the Space song. They were from Liverpool. Oh, well, that explains why I liked it. City with a big musical heritage. Yes, agree. Jim says the only Space song I knew was the Ballad of Tom Jones, which is a duet with, hold on. Someone is calling me from a number I don't know. The Ballad of Tom Jones, a duet with Saris Matthews of Catatonia. I don't know that person. I don't know how to pronounce that name, and I don't know where that region is. It sounds like Catalonia, uh, but I don't know it, so maybe it's different. Tell me, Jim. I'm curious. Yeah, I nearly mentioned that one too, Jim, but thought we might be overstating the stuff about space. Hey, space fans, unite. You're uniting on my stream. I'm here for it. Oh, space. Cat Paw's getting in on the action. Maybe there's a song called Neighborhood that y'all would recognize. I love this. It's a little mini reunion. Excellent. So that was my second mystery. And as we are with an Indigenous author, I will take this point to take a little side thing and say, oh, I'm going to go to the native memoir, and then I'm going to go to the question. Okay, so I didn't do an overlay for this because I can't do overlays anymore, but I can share my screen to show you. Gotta alternate. Nope, alter how we do things these days. So I can share the screen here and pop it up. So this is the book that I'm going to be talking about. I finished earlier in the month, and it's called Who We Are: 4 Questions for a Life and a Nation. And this is an Indigenous memoir by a Canadian judge who's now retired, Murray Sinclair. And we've also got Nigan Sinclair and Sarah Sinclair narrating. I listened to the Libro version, you will see. And Sheila Rogers and Murray Sinclair as narrators. Oh, sorry. Nigan Sinclair and Sarah Sinclair were writing credits, but Nigan Sinclair also helps narrate. So Murray starts it off with about less than half, maybe a third of the audiobook, and he's talking about how he grew up and what he knew from his parents and what he learned from his community, how he went to law school, how he changed the laws, how he got into Indigenous law in the 70s, standing for his community, and eventually became a commissioner on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I didn't know that going into listening to this, but that was pretty exciting when I finished, because by then I'd already had the inspiration with the live stream with Alice Henderson of creating a panel series where I'm gathering people in 2025, once a month, hopefully, to talk about truth and reconciliation as regards climate issues. So we have several TRCs in the world as blueprints if we wanted to take different points of that. But the Canadian one is interesting. What I found out from this book was that the TRC process, which I'd heard about but didn't know much about in Canada, was as a result of a settlement. So there was a class action lawsuit against the government for the residential school horror and tragedy that unfolded over many decades. And as part of the settlement, this process of listening to different communities and claimants, so people who were part of the lawsuit and were called claimants, or claiming harm was done to them by this system, and they could come and there was a hearing and they would be listened to by this commission and recorded and sort of gathering of information and testimonies to be compiled in a report. So that was interesting. It wasn't a judging or tribunal or inquiry initiated by the government. It was actually they were forced to do it as part of a settlement. So I thought it was revealing. So Murray talks about his life, and then Nigan, his son, talks about afterwards. He talks about like the landscape, sort of the backstory. Um, and then the third part, which is like half, is like this sort of pseudo documentary about the residential school um, system and how it has influenced Canadians, how it affected the population of Indigenous folks for so long over generations, and how the the TRC was handled, brought about, and sort of like going over the same ground that Murray does in a personal recollection, but also with lots of statistics, and like as a documentary would, or like a paper would, a white paper. So it was a sort of strange format that I didn't know about going in. But I will say, let's see, what I have in my notes. There's definitely a theme of justice for Native Canadians, First Nations. They use the term Aboriginal. In Murray Sinclair's part, he says, I will use the term Aboriginal because that's what I grew up with. That's what we used in the bodies that were in the 1970s, etc. But then in the documentary that is very like 2010 to 2015 focused, they continue using that word, different narrator, different writer. And I'm like confused by this. So if anyone knows, if if anyone comes here from the CanLit community and can tell me what the differences or what they decided on or why that was decided in this book, I would love it, because I'm just a little confused as to what term to use. But since this book uses Aboriginal, I guess I'll use that for this review. So Aboriginal justice, definitely a big theme. And what's funny is that like I had one of these book serendipity moments, as Brian would say. The Hearts of the Missing, which was a book I just reviewed in my previous wrap up, was talking about a family meeting system. So when you talk about justice and the criminal justice system and how it treats Indigenous populations within America, the Hearts of the Missing talked about the fact that the tribal justice often used family meeting as a way to keep things within the tribe and not go to a federal court for resolution. And often, or sometimes I'll say, that was seen as what's a parallel? Like a religious system that is trying to discipline its own, whereas you can see that that local administration of justice might be more helpful and, honor the um, devolution of justice in a way that the community supports. On the other hand, it also could be a way that people are pardoning people with power in their community. And so the perpetrators are not actually getting prosecuted like they should be, So I can see both sides of this argument, and I don't know the stats or, how deeply people have looked into this in America, tribal justice systems, or in Canada. But hearing about this sort of different system in Canada made me think of the previous book that I'd read, which is fiction. So I sort of just got me thinking and wondering about that. Oh, okay. So I'm catching up here just to update folks. Catatonia was the band. She is Welsh. You can hear it in her voice, says Gareth. Okay. Catatonia, Road Rage, Mulder, and Scully. Catatonia, Road Rage, Mulder, and Scully. Mulder and Scully is from the X-Files. Road Rage. I'm not following this, Cat Paw, so you'll have to explain this one more layer for me. Sorry. Jim says, Karis is pronounced like Karis. Okay, thank you for that. Karis Matthews had another duet hit with Tom Jones, Baby It's Cold Outside, for Christmas. Topical. I like that. Nicely deployed. Maggie is coming out with some negative negative news here. That kind of reconciliation will never happen in the US, she says. It hasn't yet. There have been no movements, right? Maybe we can hope for like a local effort or initiative to fill that big old vacuum. But she says like they will never take that treacherous Snake Jackson's face off the $20 bill. Yeah. There's like a micro movement that could have been done, right? And it still hasn't. So that's terrible. I agree. The family tribal reconciliation systems in many tribes means women rarely get justice or protection after being assaulted. Yes, that's what I'm talking about like one hand of the devil's advocate sort of debate on this. Like, how do we protect people that are powerless in a community where the powerful are dictating the rules of the justice system? And that goes for both types of justice systems, right? So like the tribal or the federal or state or local, whatever. So yeah, it's a thorny issue and it's a hard one that we haven't solved. Okay, so anything else on who we are? Okay, so just to give a bit of a review of the narration, it was interesting. Of course, it's usually best to hear from the person who's writing the memoir. He's an older guy with a gravelly voice. So occasionally I was rewinding to hear things to see what he had said. Um, um, and his son was much easier to understand. He definitely had a Canadian accent, which was just kind of fun to hear. And then the woman who was reading the documentary, she was very clear as well. And the other thing about the structure is that occasionally Marie Sinclair's portion had breaks for like poems, which was a bit odd. And I felt harder to follow when he was launching into them because they weren't specific format poems. So it was just sort of a departure without explicitly stating it in the audiobook. So that made it a little hard to follow, but there was only a few. So it didn't substantially interrupt or, disrupt the listening experience, just sort of we're going into a poem now. Okay. So one of the things that infuriated me was the exposition of the pipeline. So having read several Indigenous nonfiction books before this November, and continuing to do so, knowing a little bit more about this whole system that was set up is really infuriating. So to hear that there was like a literal, not literal, because it wasn't transporting liquid, but a figurative pipeline for residential schools once they were being phased out. So once they no longer had religious orders supporting them or the federal government supporting them, barely, they would take the kids in residential schools and put them in child welfare. So now what the system has for kids who are that age and don't conform to the strictures that the federal government sees as appropriate, they put them in child welfare. So a lot of Indigenous folks have decried this as like punishing people for poverty. And you could do a lot more providing directly to the families where the kids are related to their families rather than taking them out and placing them somewhere else. But there's some very bad incentives set up. So the pipeline is from the residential schools to child welfare, or if the kid is troubled, they will often be sent to reform school. And in reform school, you can be set to labor for free, just like the kids did in the residential schools. So it's this very terrible cycle. And they just pointed out that there's just a new version of it and we're still fighting. Like some progress has been made, but there is so much still to be done to make this equitable, to make it good for the children in the system, to make it good for the families, and to make it just between the populations that are doing the regulating or placement in child welfare and the communities that are being sometimes preyed on. So there's just that to point out. And so, yeah, it just touches on it. It doesn't go into it very much because they're focusing on the reconciliation process or really just the truth process at this point. But I thought that was a good one to point out. They pointed out, I think this was part of Murray Sinclair's recollection, that what he found to be the most important question in these testimonials where they had claimants speak was, do you want someone to sit with you? And I thought that was really an emotional IQ finding. So he's, pretty, what would you call it, even keel. He's very able to explain about things that were hurtful and sort of be very objective about things that happened in his childhood and the first ways he was thinking about racial discrimination. And so I thought it was really a good emotional finding when he pointed out that that was the most important question in the courtroom, because it changed the dynamic of a person who had always felt alone and powerless, and they were going to speak their truth to someone who felt supported and listened to. And so I thought that was a great finding for other um, procedures or things that we might go forward with. So, in case anyone is designing a system and listening to this channel report on this book in a very meandering way, there you go. Please respect that people need to feel supported and in community with someone, or just a stranger feel supported before they express their grievances or unearth the truth of their experiences. I thought that was great. He talked about, or I have a quote that says, humility is about empathy. And I thought that was an interesting one. True or false? Do you agree with that? Humility is about empathy. So if you're going to be humble, you need to have empathy. That was just one of the discussion questions. I'll probably put that as my pinned comment for folks on the replay. I thought that was a real interesting point. When I sort of try to think through that process, I think, okay, humility makes sense to me, because in order to, if I'm an expert at something, for example, if I'm a judge with 30 years experience and I'm listening to someone else, perhaps on the other side of the political divide or on the other side of a racial, genocidal action, and I'm trying to be able to listen to them. Being humble involves admitting that they have experiences that are very real to them. And if we're going to be operating in good faith, I have to empathize. I have to see what their pain was before I can maybe bring them into conversation so that we're both on the same page. So for me, I think when I highlighted this quote, I saw another side to it, and now I don't remember that, because I definitely agree with the statement, but maybe you guys will also remember what I was trying to get at here. Humility, because you can take humility in several different ways, but that was interesting to me. And also, the last quote that I have for who we are is, you can never achieve reconciliation without self-respect. So I think that speaks to resourcing populations, to equitable distribution, to, examining internal biases within people and within systems, so that we have respect across people and populations, as well as building people up with self-respect. And you do that in ways where, like, you're not baking bias into the school system that everyone is now a part of, that sort of thing. So I thought that was great. Some good findings, a little rocky in terms of how it was delivered and how it was marketed, because I didn't understand what they were delivering in the different formats and why I was listening to this documentary, but it gave interesting information. So I did listen to it. I just sped it up a little because it was easier to absorb than the memoir in Murray's own voice. So definitely recommend. I haven't reviewed these yet, but I'll give this one 4 stars too, I'm pretty sure. Oh, there go the dogs. Oh, Esther's here. Hi, Esther. Esther's doing Vlogmas. I'm seeing her on TikTok, which is an admirable achievement. Well done. She says, I'm just listening in a little and I'm already mad. I swear society doesn't care about kids. Bingo. Bingo. Yeah, it's capitalism, it's the machine, and it's like we've sacrificed community on its altar for sure. Maggie says to Esther, Native and mixed children aren't people according to those in the past and barely have souls, or that's the way many were treated. Yeah. I was told I had half a soul because my father was white, which is atrocious. Yeah. Not any kind of self-respect building treatment, right? People shouldn't be allowed to say that. Esther says, agreed, when you can empathize with others and see their trials and tribulation, it humbles you. Yeah. Even if you're not an expert. I think that's true. Maggie agrees 100%. And Esther says, I sort of get it, because a lot of people see and treat Puerto Ricans as second-class citizens. It's not the same, but similar enough for me to understand. their experience. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and maybe she's talking your to Maggie. Got it. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Great. Okay, so we've got 2 agrees, so maybe I don't need to, like, dig back into my brain for what I was trying to think of with that quote. But yeah, good stuff. And sorry if you can hear all the barking. I don't know what it is. They're little yappy dogs. Okay. So it's the 2 mysteries. We got the memoir, and keeping with the native and indigenous theme, I was just gonna say in here, I've got a QOTD. Boom. Oh, I forgot to put this up. So I'll put this up while I'm talking the next little bit. What would you like to buddy read in 2025? Because my next buddy read is going to be this white whale of a TBR gremlin. I've had this on several TBRs when I still did TBRs. It's The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. And every time I hear the description, I go, wow, that sounds so good. And then when I pick it up, I go, oh, that cover is so pretty. It's like, meant to look like embroidery. And it's indigenous author. And like, why wouldn't I read this? It sounds so good. And then I look, it's such a substantial book. And I go, But we're in the second half of December, and I have agreed to read this with Beth Ann Berninga Sokolar. So she has come back on Booktube in the recent months and been putting up great videos. So we are going to read this before the end of 2024, and I am finally gonna get to like review this precious gem of a novel. So my question for you, what have you been putting off, or maybe a new release that you want to buddy read in the new year? So we'll see if we get any answers to that. Because here on this channel, we don't just read Native American Heritage Month stuff in Native American Heritage Month. We read it all year round because it's so great. All right, so we're already nearing an hour. I did not think it would take that long, but you guys had great comments and distracting questions. So I am just now going to be diving into my last book to review, which is I Want a Better Catastrophe by Andrew Boyd. I had never heard of him before, but I bought this book because it was at my new local bookstore, Bold Coffee and Books. And I participated in the Kickstarter. I saw this as a great opportunity to help a new bookstore open and contribute to its cost. And the benefit that I receive is going to be holding my launch party there. So if you're in the Portland area on January 11th, that's where I will be celebrating the launch of ORLA Rafferty Seeks for Fortune, in case you're in the area. But someone else got the Kickstarter benefit of contributing a book. So they got to recommend a book for them to keep. And Allie, the owner, had never heard of Andrew Boyd, like me, but she had this in her inventory, stocked it. That's the word I'm looking for. And I came across this and I was like, oh God, I need this book now, right? I Want a Better Catastrophe, Navigating the Climate Crisis with Grief, Hope, and Gallows Humor. And I'm wondering if maybe I just make this a whole other stream that's like a special single book review. I was just sent my YouTube Wrapped for the year, which was pretty depressing. The video that was watched the most, so the most watched time, was the single book review for a book that I think I reviewed in 2022. So the last 2 years of book review is not doing so great. So maybe I should transition this to a single book review. But I have all my notes on it. I got ready with all those notes on the bottom item. And I don't think I want to go into like a second hour on this live stream for it. So I will actually break this out. I will say I'm very glad I read it. It was very helpful. I was reading the Slow Down book with Chris from Buzz on TikTok. And I recommended this to him and he got it. But I think it's really for people who have been in the climate change space of activism for a while. So I don't know if it's going to be the right book for Chris, but since he just sort of like started like, oh, I'm going to find out all this stuff and do all this activist stuff, which is great. But like processing climate grief, like we are doing in this book, is, I feel like, for someone who's done it for a long time and realizes that it's not a rosy picture and needs a way to grapple with hope and like the phases of grief, like the denial and the anger and, all that kind of stuff. And this is what he does in this book. He also goes around and interviews several big names, like maybe 6 or 7 big names in climate action and people who are on way different parts of the spectrum of climate activism. So people who think we're all doomed, we're going to go extinct the next 50 years, there's no hope. Like, here's my plan. And all the way to people who are like, we have to do everything we can. And here's my plan. And there's lots of great stuff in here that I hadn't heard of. So lots of details, lots of minutia, and people that I should really know of. A couple of them I had heard of. And the one he ends with, Robin Wall Kimmerer, definitely very famous. And so I just got a lot from this book. I engaged with it a lot. As you can see, there's corners turned down. There's page flags. There's page flags everywhere. But like I said, we're winding this hour up, and I don't like to make much longer than an hour unless it's a sprint. So, what can I pick out? One of the things that I said, we're caught between a sense of impending apocalypse and the fear of acknowledging it. That was a good quote. Grieving rituals. Yeah. I feel like We Are the Weather is very akin to this book. He doesn't talk to Jonathan Safran Foer, but the way that Jonathan, the author, was grappling with, why am I staring at this big, terrible thing and not doing anything about it? How is this affecting our planet? Is very close to the way that Andrew Boyd in this book is like, here's where I am. I'm pretty hopeless, but I'm not that type of person. So like, how do I excavate that and get through it to like a productive, for lack of a better word, position? So there's a lot of introspection. There's a lot of processing, as well as educational things and networking things about community. So in that way, those books I feel related. But that one and this one, they both helped push me to like think of creative ways to engage in local community. So one of the things that is going to come out of that is this TRC session series that I'm hoping to get people together for, and some other political stuff. So I will outline that and do a single book review for this because I think it's going to be pretty foundational for my 2025. And hopefully you guys will join me for that journey because I'm a nerd and you like this nerdery, obviously, or you wouldn't be here. Okay, so let's see. So PDX Pine is asking if the cover is beadwork. And no, I think it's embroidery. I think it's meant to mimic embroidery. Did I get that wrong? Is it beads instead? Oh, goodness. Beadwork by Holly Young. You're right. It's beadwork. It's attributed on the back. I guess I looked at it and saw what my eyes were familiar with. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. It's mimicking beadwork on the cover here. Someone did the beadwork and then like put it into the cover. Good catch. Good catch. So Maggie says she would like to buddy read The Berry Pickers, a novel by Amanda Peters. That also sounds very familiar. I think that's another Indigenous novel. No. Berry Pickers is in Northeast. It's about Maine, I think, or Michigan. One of these areas where they have like bogs where they pick berries. Am I right? I think it's something to do with Indigenous, but there's like a white component. It's either the author or like the populations in the novel. It's one of those books that I've heard of and I read the blurb, but like it's mashed up back in there. Esther says, I need to finish Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, which is great. I've heard great things about it. It's ridiculous how long it has taken me. I love it while I'm reading it. Yeah, it's weird because I think that's going to be the same with The Seed Keeper. Like I put it off for so long and I'm going to enjoy it when I get into it. I don't know. Our psyches are weird. Maggie says, Beloved Child, A Dakota Way of Life by Diane Wilson. Oh, same author. Okay, so that sounds more like nonfiction by the same author. That's cool. So if anyone wants to buddy read with anyone else, definitely hitch up in the comments. I encourage this linking up. Jim says the only Native American writers I've read are Rebecca Roanhorse, who is a sci-fi fantasy writer. So he's read Black Sun and Fevered Star, which I have yet to read, but it's on my list. And Owl Going Back. Is that another author or is that another book by Rebecca Roanhorse? Because now I'm not sure what Crota is. Owl Going Back, if it's an author name, I haven't heard of that author. And Crota, the book, I haven't heard of that book name. So you've got to jump on me. Interesting. Maggie says, that's a lot of notes. You need to do a book vlog for it. Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about this. I've already finished it, so the book vlog would not not be possible anymore. Or this, which is the notes for today's books. But either way, I do like to engage with the reading and try to be prepared to process everything I'm learning. Eloise here saying happy Wednesday. Hello, hello. Leslie saying, yes, I do heart nerdery. Yes, we're in a good club, I think. Maggie says, have you read Year of No Garbage, Recycling Lives, Plastic Problems, and One Woman's Trashy Journey to Zero Waste? No, but that's a great title. There's a chapters are sort of a fluid concept in this book, but there's one part where it says, why the fuck are we still recycling? And he does have a good comeback for this. It's like the individual action and the collective action and the industrial policy action, like, all need to work together, which I believe is true. But the individual action is essential because it means we care and we're aligning our actions with our values. And so this is a big journey, like emotional journey, as you would expect from something about grief. But like, it's so good. Yeah, so I will look this one up. Let's see. Year of No Garbage. Eve O. Schaub. Okay, I'll check that out after the stream. So thank you for that recommendation. I read another book that was about plastic pollution that was exclusively about that. I still have it, maybe reference, but I haven't gone back to reread it. So I've looked at it and gone, do I need to keep that? We'll see. It's in Portland, though, so I won't be able to get that to you right away. Maggie says it's a mystery set in Maine about a missing girl. Is that Berry Keepers by Amanda Peters? Okay, so it's Maine with the berries, which I was thinking about for the bog, but I don't remember which populations it's dealing with. It might. Anyway, I will school my mouth before I talk about it again. Self up with Andy. Hello, dropping by to wave and say hi. Jim clarifying, Crota is a horror novel. Owl Going Back is the name of the author. Crota is a mythical creature. Ooh, Laura's territory, if Laura Nettles is still here. A mythical creature from Native American stories. Okay, so they use the name of the creature for the title of the book. Oh, first of its kind. I guess you get to go that. You get to do that. Nice. Well done. Well, that's a new one I hadn't heard of. Very cool. Good find. Okay, so it's the hour mark. And what did I need to do at the end of this? Oh, okay. Just to give you, there we go. Final announcements. I will be on a Thursday show. I will be guesting on someone's stream. I think it will be Dave and Olive at Book Blather, but it's the Is This Thing On show that alternates between Gareth's channel and Dave's channel. So either one of them, they always have fun guests and they blab and they chat and they definitely go down a dark alley several times. But I am prepared because they love to talk about books and biscuits, and this is their Christmas edition that I will be guesting on. So I am armed and ready anytime you guys are with my Terry's chocolate orange. I was hoping to get some other biscuits before, but it's tomorrow at 3 p.m. for me, I believe. So we'll see what I can find before then, if I find any other biscuits. But at least I have my chocolate orange, which seems like a requirement at this point. I will just drop the link Anya's channel and the stream on Friday. So Friday morning we have our buddy read discussion of No Logo for Climathon with Anya on my channel, so that should be good. And any other announcements? Sunday, we're going to be doing planning stream. So my regular 10 a.m., 10 a.m., 9 a.m. Usually I do planning or sprints that are 9 to 11, but I will check it out. We will have Sky and Stephanie on to do some planning for 2025. If you want to be on stage on the screen, let me know. I think we have up to 5 with the free StreamYard, so still room, and that should be good because it'll help me focus because I haven't been able to do that too much here on family holiday time. But otherwise, that is all the stuff that's going down in the next week. Lots of exciting things. And those are my 5 books for today. So all 4 stars or above. This one's definitely going 5 stars. And stay tuned for the single book review. I will try to do that in the next couple weeks when I have some time. And this is the last wrap up for the year. So I will concentrate on The Seed Keeper from my buddy Reed. And even though I knew the end, because that's what you guys voted for, and my current reads, which are 3. So that gives us 5 till the end. I think that's probably a good list. So thanks for being here, everybody, and contributing. I love all the comments and great recommendations and contributions. So happy reading till the end of the year. Happy holidays. I hope you're able to spend time with family and found family and anyone your heart yearns to see, and keep those recommendations coming. So take care, everyone, and I will talk to you again soon. Ciao.